Hey guys, it's Jolene at Smith's Nature Friendly Farms. Well, guess what? We're expecting more interesting weather in the south. We are going to be getting a bit of a frost, and I thought I would show you guys what I do to prepare the garden for frost. All right, so this Canadian down south is not new to frost. Let me tell you, back in Canada, we were in a zone 3 area in Calgary, Alberta area, a little outside of the Calgary area, but close to the mountains. And we get frost guaranteed every month of the year. Not necessarily every day of the year, but every month there'll be some sort of frost. So you can be in the middle of July and all of a sudden you get this crazy night and you'll have a frost. I've seen it in every month. So frost is not something that's totally new to us. Now, freezing and frost are two very different things here. Now, we are actually going to be hovering very close to the freezing mark. Freezing will be a bit harder on our garden than just a frost. Frost, not usually a big deal. You can just throw some covers down. Sometimes, in some cases, if the frost is really light and the heat is going to be high the next morning, you don't even have to worry about it too much. But I'm of the belief that if you love it, take care of it. You got to put it away. Or in this case, there's some things that you can't put away. Super tough if you are a large-scale farmer. So I definitely feel bad when it comes to frosts or freezes and you've got a field full of tomatoes. Not a lot you can do. I'm sure there's some techniques that I'm not aware of. Perhaps I've heard of spraying them plants with water and stuff like that. I have no idea if that even works. That might work on a frost, and I'm sure it won't work on a freeze. So in my case today, I'm going to do some things to protect some things that are out in the garden. I'll show you some things we don't have to worry about, and I'll tell you a couple of plants that you absolutely, they hate frost. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. Okay, let's talk about the things that you absolutely do not want outside, even at the hint of a frost. My top 3, and I'm sure there's others out there, but my top 3, let's start with this guy right here. This is okra. So okra is a heat-loving plant. I even worry about it in the greenhouse when it's hovering around freezing. So okra is one I definitely would be careful of and make sure, like my case, I haven't put it in the ground because of this weather. Another one, sweet potato vines. If you've bought sweet potato vines, whether they are for decoration or whether they are for just creating sweet potatoes, these ones, they are the most sensitive plant to the frost. They are usually the first ones to go. So make sure those guys are put into a warm spot. And another one is coleus. If you love the beautiful bright leaves of a coleus leaf, those guys have no tolerance for frost whatsoever, so bring them in if you have them. Squash and tomatoes, they also don't like frost, but you can get away with covering them, usually as long as there's no deep freeze and the freezing temperatures don't reach them. But for the most part, they'll be a little tiny bit tougher than those plants, but those plants won't touch, they don't like any at all. So make sure you care for those. Tropicals is another one. If you have any really loved tropical plants, make sure you bring them in for any freezes. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things we can use to protect those precious plants that we already have outside. So starting with probably the best is large sheets of plastic. The thicker, the better. For a couple of reasons why I like the plastic. One is it's slightly more weighted than a frost cloth. So this one here is frost cloth. I have another, this was material that came from, somebody gave it to me. They got it with an Amazon order and I was like, yes, I will use that as cover. It's also light like the frost cloth. Challenges with light fabrics and fabrics in general, same with the sheet right here. When it rains, they get wet and heavy. Sometimes that helps them stick, great, but often before the rain comes the wind and it blows them off, so they become kind of useless. So my preference is definitely the plastic with covering around your plants, over top your plants, and then weighted down with wood or bricks if you have them. The hardest part for me is just in general having enough wood and bricks around in order to cover them. So I will use all of these. Sometimes I'll use a couple of them in conjunction with each other, but definitely covering your plants is ideal. So these are my acorn squash. So these guys are doing actually pretty darn good so far. I'm happy. So I definitely don't want them taken out by the frost. So we are going to put a cover on these guys. I got sticks in front of them to keep dogs and chickens from running into them. So I'll have to pull my sticks down, but I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so we have covered this area in 2 pieces of plastic. I'm using the pole in the middle to try and hold the 2 pieces just together. And then I use odd things, a piece of wood in the back, some old pots that have plants in it that either will survive or are already dead and I'm not worried about. So the big thing is keeping them weighted enough that the winds don't blow them off in the middle of the night. So that's our acorn squash protected. So I had, unfortunately, only a small number of Katrina cucumbers germinate in where I planted the cucumbers. So I only have 3 new starts to protect. So what do you do when there's only 3 and they're really spread out and you don't want to utilize a whole piece of plastic? I will use good old-fashioned jar. Jars are great because they're heavy. They won't be blown down by the wind. And they certainly will keep the weather off of them. You will not want to leave them in the daytime. In fact, any of these plants with any of the plastic or your covers on top, you'll need to remove during the daytime to ensure that you don't cook your plants. Unlikely they'll cook in 24 hours. It takes a couple of days, but it probably doesn't help them. So I would definitely remove the covers that you're putting on during the day, especially in Mississippi because it gets hot so fast. So although I'll probably blanket a good portion of this row, a lot of the tomato plants I'll pull and actually put them into the greenhouse. But some of these guys are in large containers that I won't be pulling. And a little bit worried that the cloth is going to hold firm in a wind because they'd have to wrap and drape over right to the ground. So I'm going to do a little bit of a double protection on these guys. And I'm going to be using these pop bottles. And I'm simply cut the bottom off the pop bottles and you will just gently push it down and push it into the soil, and that creates a mini greenhouse. Now that obviously only works on certain size plants. That won't work on giant tomato plants, but if you have smaller plants, it's a great way to do it and quite stable in the breeze. If you have a wider plant that won't fit in a pop bottle, another option is milk cartons, plastic milk cartons, bottom cut out again. And then same deal, put it down, push it into the dirt a bit, and that'll get you a mini greenhouse. So what out here am I not worried about? Well, let's start off with my kale. I know for sure kale and lettuce, they're pretty hardy, so I'm not overly worried about the kale. Also the cabbages. I actually may cover this cabbage. This is actually a Savoy cabbage. I find it a little bit more finicky than, say, the regular, like a Brunswick cabbage. So I'm going to cover it just in case because I have been dying to have a Savoy cabbage and would really enjoy eating some Savoy cabbage. So I'd be a little bit sad if it went. So what's my rule? If you love it, take care of it. Put it inside or cover it. This is the broccoli and it'll be fine as long as there's no flowers on it, which there are not yet. So it'll be fine and it'll handle any frost or freeze. Now my potatoes are not as likely to be happy in a freeze. So these guys are definitely going to be covered. Frost might hurt the leaves. I'm pretty sure it won't like the frost either. So I definitely am going to cover them and make sure that they're looked after. I have some ones in bags back there that I'll just pull into the greenhouse. So there'll be lots of moving stuff into the greenhouse. Carrots, no problem. They can freeze. In fact, they're even better frozen. Well, not frozen, but through a freeze. When a carrot goes through a freeze, it tends to sweeten them up and they actually taste better. So all the power to them. They can stay out and they don't need to be covered. Our peas should be okay. They are frost tolerant, not freeze tolerant. So as long as we just get a frost, we are okay. I probably will cover them though because I'm just going to blanket the row. And this is our eggplant. The eggplant absolutely will need to be covered. This is one of those ones that will not like any cold whatsoever, and it will need to be covered for sure. Well guys, I went from covering my plants, la-di-da, happy as can be, to storms. Yay, Mississippi, here we go again. So I got my stuff moved into the greenhouse. I got some plants put in the house. I did not hardly get anything in the garden covered. So I might be in a bit of a bind in replanting, but it is what it is. So all I can say is the most secure job in Mississippi must be being a weatherman, because this is incredible. Like, it's just incredible. So all I can do is hope that some of my plants make it through, hope the ones in the greenhouse survive, and start all over again. Well, that's it, guys. Oh, we're going to get another thunder boom. Hang on 1 second. And there we go. Makes the ground shake. Well, I better go inside. Safer than inside than outside, I'm sure. You guys be friendly, be kind.